Welcome to another wonderful episode at the Evolving Single Parent Nation podcast. I am your host, Priscilla Morgan, and today we have a special guest. My guest today is Paul Jacobs, a man raised by a single father, now dedicating his life to serving others through his work with the Food for Poor. His story is one quite of strength, sacrifice, resilience, and purpose. This conversation is about fatherhood, resilience, and the power of turning pain into service.
Mm.
My guest today again is Paul Jacobs on the Single Parent Nation podcast. Welcome, Paul. How are you?
I'm great. As you read the introduction, it really kind of brought some memories back. It's just been a testimony of my life to be able to, like you said, the word resilience is a very good term if we were going to give one word to it because it's not been it's not been a stumbling block, but it's been a stepping stone.
Perfect. I really love how you said it, not a stumbling block, but stepping stone, because people
It's true.
just think about the negatives, you know?
Yeah.
You turn yours into a stepping stone.
Yeah.
Perfect. When it comes to your childhood and your upbringing, what's a memory from your childhood that perfectly captures what life was like being raised by a single father?
Well, there's a story or a memory. It's not necessarily a story, but it's really a memory. It's almost April of 1990. Yeah, that's how old I am. uh, I'm running track and field for my high school.
Mhm.
And my father, just to give you a little context, my father played four different sports in high school. He was the
Wow.
equivalent of a state champion in England of swimming. He was, I think, in Ontario, Canada, in probably his early 20s, late teens, early 20s. He was like the third fastest in Ontario, Canada, and he was actually possibly going to be trained to go represent the Canada in the Olympics in 1976. All that being said, here it is, fast forward to 1990, and I'm running track in my high school track meet. And of
Mhm.
course, I line up in the blocks. My race is about to start, and I look off into the parking lot. So I still live by the high school where I grew up, where I went to high school, and I look over into the parking lot, and I could see him walking from his car to come into the stands. He'd never been to a track meet in any of my track meets, in any of my activities, because he worked all the time.
Mhm.
But this time, I'm like, he's there. Oh my goodness, he's here to see me run. Now, let's be honest. I think I probably placed eighth out of six runners,
Mhm.
but it didn't matter
Yeah,
because he showed up.
that made it special. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Were you one of those kid that because your parent didn't show up, it's like you weren't there, or you just understood that, daddy has to work?
Oh, I understood. It was
Yeah.
clear, and it was made clear. I mean, we have something very in common. We were both raised by Jamaican parents, right? So,
Mhm.
having said that, there is no filter. I
Right.
have to work so to put food on the table, or
Yeah.
I have to go to work so that you can put those clothes on. Do you understand?
Right.
There's a roof over your head because I go to work. And it wasn't done in a derogatory manner. It wasn't done in a way where I was, I was told, hey, listen, I never got the you better do right or else you're out of here. No, there was none of that. It was I'm showing you how this works at
Right.
a very young age. And of course, being a single father, I was the one pupil. I was the one student. I was the one in the
Yeah.
house for him to talk to and to show and to live by example. So I got it. I got it. And another funny story. So I'm here wearing a tie today, right?
Mhm.
And it's another interesting story. Single father, working all the time. I remember having to go to an award ceremony, but
Mhm.
that night, my dad had to go to work. And the award ceremony, they send home this permission slip and they tell
Mhm.
us, you have to business casual. You have to wear a tie, dress pants and a tie, dress shirt. And of course, I'm about 14, 15 years old. I've never worn a tie that doesn't clip on my collar up until that point. So how am I going to tie a tie? Well, My father said, just go in my closet, get one of my ties. I'm like, well, I don't know how to tie a tie. Of course, back then we didn't have FaceTime, right? So I got to fend for myself. And I remember going into the media center, and I remember finding an article, again, aging myself, on microfiche. It was an article on how to tie a tie. It
Yeah.
gave these little, there was no Google, right? So I had to find it somewhere, how to tie a tie. And do you know that since then till this very day in 2025, I tie my tie the same way. I know that all these men have Windsor knot and this knot. No, I have a MacArthur High School 1990 knot that I've tied for the same way every day since that day. But again, never having any animosity for my father. I just knew I got it. I had to fend for myself and learn how to get things done and be a quick learner.
Right. So you took the initiative to do it and not be one of those kids. Oh, mommy wasn't there, daddy wasn't
Yeah.
there.
No.
So it never got done. I like that. I really do like that. When you look back now as a man, now you're married, you have kids. How did being raised by a single dad shape your view on masculinity, strength, and love?
Yeah, that's great because I think there's an additional word that I would include in that, which is the answer to your question. It's humility.
Mm-hmm.
It's the ability to say, I don't have all the answers. It's the understanding that you're going to get lessons from the stumbling.
Mm-hmm.
It's the ability to come back and say, I was wrong. I
Mm-hmm.
apologize. Can we just get things right now? You know, I learned a lesson a long time, and I don't know if it came from being raised by my father or just came along with the life lessons. And I've always said, I'd rather get it right than be right. And so humility was the real lesson that kind of helped me learn, you know, because masculinity is not fix my dinner. Masculinity is not, hey, I'm the man, I wear the pants. No, everybody wear pants, okay? Masculinity is responsibility. Masculinity is humility when you miss it. Masculinity is, hey, listen, we're in this together. This is not I'm not just this lone captain on this ship. We're all in this together. So everything I do affects the whole.
Love it. I love the way how you describe masculinity. I know for me with my kids, I'm like, because your kids think you know it all, right? Because you're a mommy, you're an adult. And so I tell them all the time, I say, listen, I don't know it all. Okay. Grace and mercy on me. So I love how you define the masculinity.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What's the hardest part of you being a father, and what's the most beautiful part?
Wow. You know, the hardest part, I think, is what's in store for tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a strong faith in the Lord that He's going to prepare me today for tomorrow. That's for me is probably the most important thing I can take from living every day, not knowing what tomorrow holds, but at least preparing myself, you know? And so I think not knowing what tomorrow is, and again, you know, my pastor always says, if you knew what was coming, if you knew what tomorrow held, well, you wouldn't need him. You wouldn't need faith. You wouldn't need the Lord. You'd just be living it out and waiting your time.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that that building of faith, knowing that it's hard, but at the same time it's rewarding, right?
Yeah.
Because you hold. And I guess the most enjoyable thing when I think about it, a beautiful thing, is the fact that you see the results of holding on. You see the results of faith. You see the results of companionship, togetherness, cooperation. You know, you see the growth in your family because you did the right things or you got it right. Again, because again, seeing the growth in family doesn't necessarily mean you're perfect. There is no perfect. Only one perfect one, and he lives on the inside of me, and it's not me. But it's getting it right and understanding that we all together can learn from even the stumbling and the falling. And I you know, when I look back and I think of my father raising me and he wasn't perfect by a long shot. And if he was sitting here with me in this interview, he'd say the same thing. He wasn't perfect by a long shot,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, he was the perfect one for me. He was the perfect one that God allowed to father me and to prepare me for the life that I have and the life that I lead and the family that I have now.
Amazing. That you said it so beautiful. I know when we spoke and you told me, you were raised by a single dad, you said there's no way you could have paid back your dad for raising you, right?
Oh yeah.
Did you ever feel like there was something missing, or did you manage to fill both roles the way that, you were raised?
I think, okay, so my father worked around the clock. I mean, literally, he sold cars. And for anybody who works in the service industry or sales, if you don't show up, you don't eat. There's no paycheck at the end of the week, right?
Mhm.
And so he was always making deals. People were always calling him, and anybody who's ever bought a car, you get what you go through as a customer. You're waiting, waiting for the paperwork. My father tells this famous story that the longest he's ever had to work until a deal was done was 5 o'clock in the morning, literally at the dealership until 5 o'clock in the morning. I don't remember that, but I'm sure it happened during my adolescence. But the point being, when it was time to make decisions for education, because he worked a lot, and my father was an educated man, he went to college. Um, he wasn't there to help me make the decisions. I remember this one very famous story. I can't. I had a guidance counselor, Mrs. Weeda Ross. She's gone on to be with the Lord now, um, and she's passed away. But she came. She came in my life at the right time. And I think that's been the blessing in my life, is that people have entered into my life when God knew that my father couldn't fill that gap. And so education was a big one. Now I have a master's degree, and I remember getting ready to leave high school. I'm in my junior year, because junior year in high school is when you get all those college applications. So over the summer, you get all these college applications, you make your choice, you get into your senior year and say, hey, I've declared when I graduate, I'm going Florida International University. That's where I intended. And so anyway, Mrs. Ross said, where are your college applications? What are you going to do after graduation? I said, well, I'm graduating. I'm going to work. I was working at the time, my little hourly job, which was a lot of money back then. $72 a week. Come on. Yeah, I could do a lot with $72 a week. That filled the gas on my little car. Anyway, so she says, oh, no, 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 no. I want to see those college applications on my desk next week.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, Dad's not asking for that. Well, he's not around to ask for that because he's busy working, providing. And so he wasn't there to help me make those decisions. And quite frankly, I don't even know if he knew about all the college applications. Well, the only way he knew about the college applications is when I asked him for money for the application fee. I said, hey, they're asking me for $25 here, or I need $50 to apply here. But other than that, I didn't have him in that place. And then when I entered into college, even more so, because I became more independent. He was still focused on work because he still had to provide. But I always had people that God placed in my life to fill that gap, even though I didn't have it for my father. So there's stories of college and stories while I was in school, after high school. He has no clue because he was working all the time.
Yeah.
But I had a foundation.
Yeah, amazing. So you know how they say it takes a village to raise a child. So daddy was busy working, but you had that village of your school teacher that helped you and pushed you and mentored you to, go
Yeah,
to college, right?
that's
So that's
exactly right.
amazing. That's amazing. And that's just the power of community and having that village
Yeah.
that that gives you a solid foundation or structure.
Yeah, yeah. Paul had a village, that's for sure. I think I had a couple of states, not just a village. I had a couple of counties because I needed it.
Amazing. And thank God you had it.
Yeah.
So we talk about, how you were raised by a single father. We're gonna dive into, how you turn pain into purpose, your calling and your career. So you now work for Food for the Poor, an
Yeah.
organization rooted in service.
Yeah.
So do you think the way you were raised influenced that path?
Absolutely. I
Mm-hmm.
had a very unique entrance into Food for the Poor. So I came to Food for the Poor to interview for the position that I have now. You know, even though I'm a podcast host for the Beyond the Plate, a Food for the Poor podcast, but I started in 2010 as a on-air, and I still am an on-air fundraiser. When I got here, I had 5 interviews. Imagine that. 5 interviews for my position. Yeah. The last one from our executive director, our then executive director, was the most unique because the very first question that he asked me was, Paul, he looked me in the eye, can you love the poor? Now, I had my resume memorized. I had my canned answer to every obstacle. What are my strengths and my weaknesses? I used to teach people in college when I worked for the career services department how to best interview. I was not prepared for that question, but I was prepared to share my life because I understood the hardship I went through growing up poor, growing up without. And then from that place, I could understand, not know, because you can really never know someone's situation unless you walk in their shoes. But I know what it was like walking in my shoes, and I could relate. But I could understand not only what I was going to do as a fundraiser, but the urgency needed in the work that I did, because I remembered the urgency that we needed growing up in a single family household when the electricity went off, when the water was cut off. I mean, there were stories and days upon days where we needed help right now. It wasn't even a question of waiting a day, waiting a week. And so I think I brought a lot of that, and I still have it, into what I do today.
Amazing. So to be honest, your story makes sense. Your journey makes sense. And you are so in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you feel that way?
I listen, I used to say this. Coincidences are when God wants to remain anonymous. But I don't believe in coincidences. I believe in purpose.
Yeah.
I believe that I have been brought here for a purpose. And so all of what I've experienced, even up to recently, we have weekly prayer services where the employees lead prayer service for the other employees. And I recently shared my testimony. Finished the prayer service, I get a text message from 2 of my colleagues here. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being so transparent about what you went through, because I've been through that and I needed to hear that to help encourage me. So I believe in purpose, and I think that's why I'm here.
Right. Amazing. Can you tell us, like, briefly, because when people talk about, or I've heard for Food for Poor for a long time, for years. Can you just give us like a brief overview of what Food for Poor does? Because in my head, I'm like, they just give food to the poor. But I know when I met you, you were with one of your coworkers, and they dived into what Food for the Poor was, and I was like, oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah. I'll tell you that, but I'll tell you this story. So before I came to work with Food for the Poor, excuse me, I used to work for another company, and I would drive by this headquarters every day to go to work, and I would see the sign from the road. And the main road, I would see the sign, and I'd say, oh, wow, that's a very big food bank. That's a big building for a food bank, Food for the Poor. Until I walked in the doors and found the purpose and the mission of Food for the Poor. Food for the Poor is rooted in a scripture reference in Matthew 25:40, when Jesus says, whatever you've done for the least of these, you've done unto me. Food for the Poor for the past 43 plus years has been providing paths out of poverty to families, to communities, to partners, and transforming lives through 10 focused areas, everything from housing, food, nutrition, life-saving water and hygiene, vulnerable access, or helping vulnerable communities to get access, emergency relief, like in the midst of hurricanes, like in Jamaica, Hurricane Beryl in the summer of 2024. And so those 10 focus areas helps us provide pathways through our partnerships in 15 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, and partnering with trusted partners that are vetted and do what they say they're going to do and are accountable so that we can be accountable back to our donors who really drive the mission of Food for the Poor every single day.
Amazing, amazing. 43 years, that's a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
That's
it's a lifetime for many people. There are people here who work at Food for the Poor, weren't even born when Food for the Poor began. Imagine that.
yeah, yeah, amazing. That's an amazing establishment.
Yeah.
What do most people misunderstand about poverty and hunger, and what have you seen that changed you forever?
Oh, that's simple because it's part and parcel to my life. The one thing that is associated that I hear, and again, it's not
Mm-hmm.
everyone, but this is the comment I hear a lot in the circles that I'm in different times, is laziness. It's
Mm-hmm.
lack of work. When I say lack of work, meaning lack of going out to help pick up your bootstraps. I have never been to Haiti, never been to Guatemala, never been to Honduras, never been to Jamaica, and visited those countries and seen. No, I mean, I've been there, but I'm saying I've never visited and seen a lazy person.
Mm-hmm.
I've experienced that in my own life because here's my father working 2 and 3 jobs, but unfortunately, barely could pay the rent, couldn't keep the lights on. We had trouble keeping the water running.
Mm-hmm.
This man worked incredibly hard, and I see that. I've met mothers who work 7 days a week, working, literally toiling for $2 a day. Now, you see these national averages. You probably Google it and you say, what's the average salary for a poor person? And then, the United Nations or whoever the authority is would say around $2. But I've seen it. I've been there. I met a father who he and his wife would leave their 3 children with a neighbor and go to the coast in Guatemala and go work for, he says, I would go work for 25 quetzales. Just so you understand the conversion, it's 8 to 1. That's $3. And he would have to pay transportation there and back for $3. But it's all he had. That's not lazy in the least. And so that's what I really see that misunderstanding. And so when you look at, and even here domestically, it takes a lot of work to survive
Mm-hmm.
in a poverty situation. And again, it's not every case, but overall, the generalization of laziness, yeah, it is really a misunderstanding.
Amazing. I know I shared the when you mentioned you see mothers working 7 days a week for very little. I shared my story with you right before we met.
Yeah.
We were at the stoplight in Atlanta, and my kids saw a family of 5, 3 kids, the mom and the dad, and they were begging. So there's a lot of homeless people on the streets in Atlanta, in places you'll never imagine them to be. And I told them, I said, you see that? That's the reason why I work 7 days a week, because I want to make sure we have roof over our head, 1 and 2 hot meals on the table. I'm like, don't take life for granted.
Right.
Because sometimes people do take things for granted. But when you see people in unfortunate situation, it puts you in a moment of gratitude.
Yeah.
And
No,
I
absolutely.
yeah. What has been the most emotionally difficult day doing this work? I'm sure you've seen a story or a family that made you so emotional. And what did that teach you about yourself?
Wow. Eugene was a father that I met on the northern coast of Haiti in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
He had just lost his wife and his
Mm-hmm.
youngest child within a 3-month span. Excuse me. His wife died of an illness. His youngest child died from complications due to malnutrition.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
He had his oldest son, who was about 12 or 13 years old, that he was the helper now. He was the co-parent, if you will, from the perspective of trying to help provide. And when he was, you see this face and this familiar look on this face of a father. And I've seen it in Eugene and I've seen it in other fathers, this brokenness.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't just the brokenness of Eugene and his demeanor and the way his voice cracked as he tried to keep it together for those other children. It was the
Mm-hmm.
oldest son. When I looked in his eyes, I saw a familiar look in his eyes, and it was the look of my brother Adam. You see, my brother Adam was that son that didn't take poverty lying down. And unfortunately, he took to the streets. And unfortunately, he found himself in places that were quite undesirable. And as a result of that, my brother in 2007 was shot and killed. And I remember Eugene's son's face and that look in his face. And I said, I've seen this look before. And when I came back and I looked at the pictures, it was the same look that my brother Adam had, that I'm going to do whatever it takes to get out of this situation. And I thought to myself, my God, it only takes one bad seed to offer him something that looks desirable to get out of this poverty situation, whatever it may be, but it's not going to help the family. And in fact, it's going to derail his future. And I saw that same look in his son's face as I saw in my brother Adam. And I thought, my God, how long is it before he falls into that same place? Maybe not losing his life, but losing his life, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Wow. That must have really touched you.
Oh, it still does to this day. I mean,
Yeah.
as you're talking, I'm getting emotional just thinking about it.
Yeah.
And that was, over a decade ago.
Wow. When it comes to manhood, fatherhood, and healing, like if your dad was in front of it, I know when we met, your dad had called at one point, right? If your dad could call right now or show up in the studio, what would you thank him for?
Well, Paul Sr. would get a lot of thank yous from Paul Jr. I often say, so to give some context, I moved in with my father to take care of him full time in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
I was living in my own place and I was traveling back and forth. It was an 18-mile journey each way, back and forth, going to clean the house, going to fix him his meals, making sure that he had his meds, going back to his house to take him to doctor's appointments, dropping him back off, and then going back to work. It was quite taxing. And I said, you know what? I'm going to move in and be there full time to care for you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's quite difficult. The doctor's appointments,
Yeah.
the specialized diet, medications, and you become, almost a medical professional learning all these medications and why they're so important, and then convincing him why you cannot miss your med pass or you cannot miss your insulin shot, et cetera, and so forth. But it was quick to me to remember, and if he was sitting here, and I've often said this to him,
Mm-hmm.
I could not do for you what I do now and even measure up in my pinky what you have done and the sacrifices that you have made for me. My father, who quite frankly was a gifted athlete, my father who was, I feel that I'm an articulate person and I can communicate, I'm a good communicator, but my father literally leaps and bounds. My father taught me a lesson about having a good name. And I saw that lesson lived out before me. I remember my father would, when he retired, people were, customers were still calling him up to a year after his retirement, needing his help. They still call from time to time today. And he's been retired for years. Because of those lessons, I am who I am. And he has taught me so much about, and I tell him routinely, I remind him how important those lessons and those experiences were for me in my life.
Amazing. Well, you know what? The way how you keep thanking, you're actually taking care of him now is like saying thank you, you know?
Yeah.
They have that saying, once a man, twice a child.
Yes. Yes, that's very true.
Yeah. Amazing. I'm glad you're taking care of him though. That tells a lot about you as a person.
I think we both benefit, he and I. It's a
Yeah.
mutual thing. And my wife too, who lives with us.
Yeah, amazing. So in what way have you healed, and in what ways are you still healing, and from the emotional journey of growing up without, just having a structured traditional family structure? Um, in what ways have you healed and still healing?
Oh, well, the healing is forgiveness. Number
Mm-hmm.
one. If there was one lesson, if there was one thing, if there was, the Lord take me and I'm gone and I could leave one thing on this earth, it's the word forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
I have learned to forgive. But forgiveness is a two-parter, right? It's just not
Mm-hmm.
forgive. I forgive you. So I forgive you. We're good.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, do you remember that thing I forgave you of? Oh, and it's still there. It's still, it's still like resonating right here in this little spot. You
Mm-hmm.
don't show it in the forefront, but it's still there. You've learned to forget. There's times when I'll be reminded of a memory or a story, and I say, man, I forgot all about that. Because the forgiveness is so permanent that those things no longer drive my view of things or how I express myself. And I think that all of those moments of forgiveness, taking the stories of the past, and there are many. I just finished sharing with one of my colleagues, my co-host on the Beyond the Plate podcast. I told him about a story about when I was 13 years old and my dad got real hot over something I had done. But I said it with just recalling a story as if I was just reading a page in a book. There was no emotion coming up. There was no animosity, no angst. There was no, can you, and I made sure that it didn't put my father in a negative light. It was more of an object lesson to really, because he's a young father, right? And I said, it helped me understand where he was at in his life. And I take those lessons along the way and I basically apply the lessons or the principles or the teachable moments
Mm-hmm.
from that past in my forgiveness, even to this day.
Amazing. Your responses are just like so beautiful.
Thank God.
What's one thing that your dad did, maybe silently or without praise, that realized was a radical act of love?
Well, my father, when I started taking care of him and taking him to doctor's appointments and
Mm-hmm.
bringing him to, because my father has several challenges physically, health wise, and he spent a good part of 2019, the year 2019, in hospitals and rehab. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
his line often is, I worked all these years,
Mm-hmm.
never once went to a hospital. All of a sudden, I retire. I got all these medications, and I got to go back to all these different doctors. Well,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's a result of all of those days. But anyway, he did something that I really took for granted. And now as a husband and as a provider, I understand it. He once said to me early on in me taking care of him, taking him to all these doctors, he said, just in passing, he says, I got really good insurance. Okay, got really good insurance. I'm all right. What? Okay. And then the illnesses happened, and then the hospitalizations, and then the added medication and the added procedures that needed to be done, all covered by the investments he made for years. Didn't cut corners. I
Mm-hmm.
even had a doctor that once said during a medical procedure, I think he was getting he had severe cataracts and had to get his eyes done, right?
Mm-hmm.
Doctor said, your father's got good insurance. Yeah, he told me that. I see it now. But the investments he made so that he wasn't a burden later on in life. He didn't know what he would be going through, but he knew that he needed to make those investments. And it paid off because it's not a burden on me. I don't have to work 2 and 3 jobs, and the second and the third job has to help pay for his cataract surgery or his diabetes medication or his fill in the blank because he made
Amazing.
those investments silently. I never
Yes.
knew, had no idea.
Yeah, he created a solid structure. In other words, he prepared
Yeah,
for, retirement and just, old age.
that's right.
Yeah, and so that's so important though, to prepare, to have a solid foundation and prepare, because it's going to come, it's inevitable, and it's so important to prepare. So I made sure I set that preparation in place.
Exactly.
Yeah. What does legacy mean to you, and what legacy are you trying to build through your work and your own story?
That is, I think that's the $64,000 question, right? That's the if we had the answer to that, we'd be done. We'd know it. But I think what I've experienced is a scripture from the Bible. It says a good name is better than rubies and riches and
Mhm,
gold. To leave a good name,
mhm,
to have a name that's worthy to be counted upon, that people know that when I hear Paul Jacobs, I know that I can depend on that. When I hear Paul Jacobs is involved, I know that there's going to be a level of excellence. When I hear Paul Jacobs, I know that this is someone who will sacrifice for me, and I'll find myself in the same position to help respond. I mentioned it earlier. My father had a very good name, and I learned that early in life. I live in South Florida here, and it gets very hot in South Florida for those who are watching this podcast. Um, I remember one summer, my car AC died, early retirement, gone.
mhm,
And it was an older vehicle, and I didn't have car payments, but I didn't have car payments because I couldn't afford car payments. I couldn't afford to replace the whole AC. So my
mhm,
dad called in a favor and said, go to XYZ business. Okay. So I went up to the counter, and I said, hi, I'm Paul Jacobs, and I'm here to get my AC fixed. It's gone. I need help, and need to get the whole thing replaced. The young lady said at the desk, I'm sorry, we're full up. We really have a lot of cars right now. Can you have someone pick you up and you just leave the car and we'll call you when it's ready? Okay. Now, the answer in my head was no, because I had to go to work and I had errands to run. I had things to do. But I couldn't drive this car in the sweltering heat in the middle of summer. I said, well, oh, okay. I said, my father sent me here and said that maybe we could, I could get this done. And who's your father? And I said, well, I'm Paul Jacobs Jr. My dad's Paul Jacobs and I named the place where he worked. And she said, you're Paul Jacobs' son? I said, yes. Um, Give me 1 second. And she walked through this door it was like a secret compartment. I didn't even see the door. She walked through this door and then she came back. But then there was a guy that followed her back. It was the
mhm,
owner of the company. He says, hey, you're Paul Jacobs' son? I said, yes, ma'am, sir. And he said, have a seat in the waiting room. I'll have the car out in a little bit.
mhm.
A good name is better than
Reputation, yeah.
wealth and riches. Yeah.
Amazing. What would you say to single parents listening who feel like they're not enough, they're struggling, they feel alone, they feel like the back is against the wall, they're stuck?
Oh, well, first of all, write all those things down. Write
Mhm,
every last thing you feel is you're inadequate, or you don't think you matter, or your decisions aren't adding up, or you've made mistake after this mistake after this mistake after this mistake. Write it all down. Right, take a sheet of paper, get it all down, write it all down.
mhm,
Then I want you to do something very important. You pick up the sheet, right, and I want you to look at them, and then just simply do one of these. It's a very professional move, and throw it away,
amazing.
because tomorrow's coming.
Yeah.
Because yes, those were real, but that was yesterday.
Yeah.
You can capitalize on that.
Mhm,
The Bible says that though a man falls 7 times, yet shall he arise. And he's not
mhm,
talking about masculine. He's talking about you. Get back up.
mhm,
Get back up. My father, 3 jobs, couldn't keep the lights on, couldn't keep the water running, got back up every day and went to work. I had my failures and my mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
lost jobs, lost money, made bad decisions. I got back up. Tear that list of the past and get back up. That's what I would tell you, single parent listening right now. If you
Yeah.
have had mistakes, we've all had them. And Bull, by the way, I got a secret. I got a big top secret thing I'm going to reveal right now. Classified. You're going to make another one, but you get back up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, releasing, forgiving yourself is hard, but grace and mercy is something we have to do almost every day because guess what? Life is a learning curve. We're constantly learning and growing every single day.
That's
You
right.
can't be beating up on yourself every day. Oh, I didn't have this, or I didn't do this right, or this happened. Just learn the lesson and just keep it moving. And
Exactly.
releasing yourself for those from the self-judgment, it's tough,
Yeah.
but it's something you have to learn to do, find your own way of doing it and just do it
Yeah.
because none of us are perfect.
Yeah.
So that was amazing what you said. What advice would you give to a child who's growing up in a single parent household today? I have to let
Wow.
my kids listen to this one.
All right, kids. I want the kids to lean in on this one. I want them. I'm gonna get real close to the microphone on this one.
I'm
Okay.
leaning.
Your parents were once your age
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't understand, but they're now their age and things have become way clearer. Please trust. It's a lesson you're learning now that you will carry throughout your entire life. A lesson of trust, a lesson of humility, a lesson of getting back up. And you and your mistakes are still cared for, still have a roof over your head, still have the school supplies you need in the fall, still have a vacation if your parents can take you on vacation, still have a meal to eat. And all those things they don't consider that fringe benefits. Those are responsibilities of your
Mm-hmm.
parents. So just understand that your parents were your age and now they're their age
Mm-hmm.
and they got clarity just like you will, but just trust the process.
Amazing message. Amazing message. If
Oh,
your story could shift just one mindset today, what would you hope it would shift?
there's somebody right now and you're listening and I'm talking to you. There's a lot of people watching this podcast, but I'm talking to you and you hurt. I want to tell you, I have hurt. I have been hurt. I have been hurt by family. I have been hurt by strangers. I have been hurt by coworkers. I have been hurt by some of the people that I've called the closest to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling you, it's not worth keeping it. And I don't mean to cheapen what you've been through. That's not the case because we've all gone through and they meant something serious for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm telling you, it's not worth keeping and holding on to. It's the old adage, right? Hating someone, not forgiving someone. It's like drinking poison yourself and expecting the other person to die. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
Let it go. And if they have to leave your life for a season, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine because everyone gains perspective. Everyone comes back around. And I have wonderful relationships. A perfect example is my parents divorced when I was 9. So I'm literally living under a single parent household since I'm 9 years old. Starting at 9, I should say. And today at 51, both my parents are very close. They literally call each other on birthdays. They invite each other over for holidays. This is
Yeah.
happening right now. I never saw it at 9. I never saw it at 12. I never saw it at 18, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
seeing it today.
And they went through a forgiveness stage to get
Yeah,
to that point of peace.
that's right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an amazing story because you don't hear that every day. It's
Yeah,
just turmoil and arguments and
yeah. But
the
it's possible.
judgments and this person and that person,
Yeah,
your fault. And
yes, exactly. But
that's
it's
an
possible.
amazing story. All right, three more things. We're pretty much at the end of the interview. So Beyond the Plate, can you tell us briefly about that? And like if somebody wants to donate to Food for Poor, how can they reach out or donate?
Yes, of course. All you simply have to do is go to all of your social media platforms, Instagram, TikTok, at Beyond the Plate podcast, or you can find us at foodforthepoor.org/podcast. When you go to our podcast, whether you're watching us on YouTube, and you can find us on YouTube at Food for the Poor Beyond the Plate. When you watch our podcast, you're going to hear stories of transformation, inspiring stories that nourish your soul, possibly even move you to be the next mover and shaker for the mission of Food for the Poor. Whether you're a Shaggy that hears of the devastating earthquake in 2010 while recording an album and says, I can't just ignore that. I've got to do something, and take that same recording session and rewrite all the lyrics to a song and donate the entire proceeds of that song to earthquake victims. Or you're simply a man named Aubrey McLean, who grew up in Guyana, poor, and then as a single father himself, found his way to a church, was given the opportunity to get food, and then just years later, kids are all grown up now. He's riding his bicycle down a street and sees a very familiar logo, only to find out it's the same organization that helped feed his children when they were young in Guyana. And now he's living here. And now he is an active volunteer with Food for the Poor. Whatever you can do, just understand that when you listen to our podcast, you're going to hear stories that are going to uplift you, inspire you, and cause you to want to lean in, because there's meaning and purpose in everything that you do in life.
Amazing. Yeah. So yeah, you don't have to be rich. People think, oh, I have to be rich or be a millionaire to donate. No, they probably have, like you said, you can actually volunteer to help out, or a dollar. A dollar doesn't seem like a lot, but it helps.
Let me tell you, you hit the nut, hit it on the head right there. There's a young volunteer here at Food for the Poor. He has been volunteering here, goodness gracious, for a couple of years, almost 3 years now. This young man has a father who's done very well in his career, and his father received the young man received a gift for being a volunteer, and his father uses that gift on a regular basis, and was so moved by the generosity of that gift, finally says, I'm going to start donating on a regular basis to Food for the Poor.
Mhm.
Just the expression of generosity. You have generosity in your heart, and you can express it in your own way, whether it's your time, it's your talents, or it's your treasure, but you could do something.
Amazing. And so, because how we ended up talking was because I'm starting my charity foundation this year, the Single Parent Nation Charity Foundation.
Yes.
And so I came to you as advice, and here we are at a podcast interview. So just so you know, like Paul was willing to help me if he could help me with whatever help I needed with my own foundation. And just so you know, like it's a lot of work. So when you get help from Food for Poor or any kind of foundation out there, be so grateful, because it's a lot of work. It took a whole establishment. And I mean, you guys are in business for 43 years.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's big. That speaks volume on the establishment. So amazing job to people like you and the entire team for showing up every day and giving 100% and being able to do something and give back to the community.
Well, it's an honor, and it's our donors that drive us. They're the heartbeat of what we do.
Amazing. So two more questions. At the end of each interview, when I have guests, I ask two fun questions. One is, if I was a genie and I give you the wish of being anywhere in the world, where would you want to be right now?
I do the little doop, and I'd be right home with my family. There's no place I'd rather be than home with my family. There's no place, no seven wonders of the world, no beach, no mountain, no river, no ocean that is more comforting than being in the presence of my family.
amazing. That's so that melts my heart. But you're the second person that said that.
Ah,
And most people usually say, beach or some vacation spot. So
I'm
that's
a
really,
well-traveled person, so I've been a lot of places. No place like home.
yeah, no place like home. And then the next question is, it's a question to me. So I asked you a million questions. I'm giving you the opportunity to ask me one question.
Why me?
Why I have you on the podcast?
Yes.
So I think so we met, like I said, we were at an event
Hmm.
and I saw your badge and it said food for the poor. And my gut feeling was like, go talk to the man because you need help with your charity foundation. And I've been trying at it for a long time, trying to understand it because it's a lot. I've
Yeah.
registered LLC and I've done business, but it's like a non-profit. It's a whole different ballgame. And I saw you and then you disappeared. And I was like, oh my God, you should have just took the moment. But I was in a meeting when I saw you. And then I came across, I think it was the end of the day at the event, and we were in the same meeting. And I was like, I looked up and I saw your badge, Food for the Poor. I was like, let me talk to him now. I remember I had to wait because we were both talking to the same person, and I had to wait on to talk to you. And it was in that conversation of you talking about charity foundation, and the take home message was efficient and effective, right? I
Yes,
didn't forget those two words.
that's right.
um you were telling me about your story that you were a single dad, and I was like, perfect. You would make such a perfect guest on my podcast because I don't just interview single parents. When I do interview people on a podcast, it's also people that were raised by a single parent
Yeah.
because it says something. We have to hear the other side too, what it's like being raised by a single parent, because it's just always single parent talking about their journey as a single parent, but nobody ever really spoke about the journey of being raised by a single parent.
Yeah.
And it's a whole different perspective and a different lens. So it's amazing to hear the story coming from, somebody who was raised by a single parent. So with that said, I'm so grateful, so thankful. I feel I'm going to listen to this about 3 times. I'm so grateful and thankful for having you as a guest on the Single Parent Nation podcast. I'm sure everybody that's listening to this was inspired,
Amen.
and you're doing such a great job. You're an amazing person. You and your team at Food for Poor and the Beyond the Plate movement is so amazing. And I'm looking forward to my own journey, starting my charity foundation. So I'm going to be calling you.
I'm here. You have my number. You know that.
Yeah, thank you for being an amazing person, though.
Thank God for that. And I thank God for Paul and Marie, Jacob and Burke taking care of me, raising me right.
We got Paul and Marie.
God bless you. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.